Officer Henry West arrests a black millionaire Cooper Turner outside a luxury hotel, accusing him of theft. 3 minutes later, Cooper's brutal revenge strikes, shaking Officer Henry's world. How far will Cooper go to hold the entire police department accountable? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Cooper Turner stepped out of the community center, his heart full and his hands dirty. He had spent the morning painting walls and planting flowers alongside volunteers at the charity event he had organized. The sun was high in the sky now, and Cooper knew he had to hurry. He glanced down at his worn jeans and paint-splattered t-shirt, a far cry from his usual polished appearance. As he climbed into his modest sedan, Cooper couldn't help but smile. These were the moments he lived for, connecting with people, making a real difference. But now, it was time to switch gears. He had an important meeting with investors, one that could change lives across the city. The drive to the hotel was quick, and Cooper's mind raced with possibilities. He imagined the faces of those who would benefit from this new project: families finding affordable housing, kids playing in safe parks, small businesses thriving on revitalized streets. His excitement grew with each passing mile. As Cooper stepped out of his car, he took a deep breath, savoring the crisp air. He straightened his paint-stained shirt, a small reminder of the morning's good work. The hotel's grand entrance loomed before him, its polished doors reflecting the afternoon sun. Across the parking lot, Officer Henry West's eyes narrowed. He watched Cooper with growing suspicion, his mind jumping to conclusions. The contrast between Cooper's casual attire and the luxury hotel set off alarm bells in West's head. Without hesitation, West strode towards Cooper, his hand resting on his belt. "Hey you," he called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. "What's your business here?" Cooper turned, surprised by the harsh tone. He smiled, trying to diffuse the tension. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm here for a meeting with some investors." West's eyes scanned Cooper from head to toe, his disbelief evident. "A meeting? Dressed like that? I don't think so. Let me see some ID." Cooper's heart sank. He knew this dance all too well. "Of course, officer," he said calmly, reaching for his wallet. "I can explain." "Hands where I can see them," West barked, his hand moving to his holster. Cooper froze, his hands in the air. Passers-by began to stare, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. "Officer, please," Cooper said softly. "There's no need for this. I'm just here for a meeting." But West wasn't listening. His mind was made up. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered. "You're under arrest for suspicious activity and possible trespassing." Cooper's mind raced. This couldn't be happening, not today of all days. "Sir, I'm not trespassing. I'm a guest here. If you'd just let me explain." West grabbed Cooper's arm roughly, spinning him around. "I said hands behind your back," he growled, slapping handcuffs on Cooper's wrists. The cold metal bit into Cooper's skin as West tightened the cuffs. Cooper winced, his heart pounding. He could hear the gasps and murmurs of shocked onlookers. "Please," Cooper tried one last time, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Check with the hotel. They're expecting me. My name is Cooper Turner." But West was beyond reason. He shoved Cooper towards his patrol car, his face twisted with unwarranted anger. "Save it for the station," he snapped. As Cooper was about to be pushed into the back of the police car, he caught sight of the hotel entrance. The investors he was meant to meet were just arriving, their faces a mix of shock and confusion at the scene unfolding before them. He took deep breaths to calm his racing heart. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, their phones raised to capture the unfolding drama. Cooper closed his eyes, fighting back the wave of humiliation that threatened to overwhelm him. Just then, a sleek black car screeched to a halt nearby. Out jumped Rita, Cooper's assistant, and behind her, a tall man in a sharp suit, Cooper's lawyer, Michael. "What's going on here?" Michael demanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Officer West turned, his face a mask of annoyance. "This is police business. Step back." But Rita was already on her phone, dialing frantically. Mr. Jameson, it's Rita. We have an emergency at the front entrance. Moments later, the hotel's grand doors burst open. A portly man in an expensive suit rushed out, his face flushed with panic. It was Mr. Jameson, the hotel manager. "Officer, wait," he called out, slightly out of breath. "There's been a terrible mistake." West's eyebrows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Jameson gestured wildly towards the police car. "That man you've arrested, that's Cooper Turner. He's one of our most valued guests, a prominent businessman here for an important meeting." The color drained from West's face as the reality of his mistake sank in. He glanced at the crowd, their phones still recording, then back at Cooper in the car. With obvious reluctance, West opened the car door. "Mr. Turner, there seems to have been a misunderstanding." As the handcuffs came off, Cooper rubbed his wrists, the skin red and chafed. He stepped out of the car, his legs slightly shaky. Rita rushed to his side, her eyes brimming with concern. "Mr. Turner, are you all right?" Cooper nodded, but his eyes told a different story. The sting of public humiliation burned deep, and the familiar pain of racial profiling twisted in his gut like a knife. Mr. Jameson approached, his face a picture of distress. "Mr. Turner, I cannot begin to express how sorry we are for this outrageous incident. Please, let us make this right." But Cooper barely heard him. His gaze was fixed on the crowd, their phones still raised, still recording. He saw the mix of pity and shock in their eyes, and it made his chest tighten. Officer West cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Turner, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Cooper finally turned to face West, his voice low but steady. "A misunderstanding, officer? Is that what we're calling it?" The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. West shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet Cooper's gaze. As the crowd began to disperse, Cooper straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity. But the damage was done. The memory of cold metal on his wrists, of being shoved into a police car in front of gawking strangers, it clung to him like a shadow. 3 minutes later, as Cooper tried to collect himself, his phone buzzed incessantly. News of the incident was spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Video clips of his arrest were being shared, commented on, and reposted at an alarming rate. Inside the hotel, Mr. Jameson frantically dialed the police department's public relations office. "This is a disaster," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "We need to get ahead of this story before it spirals out of control." Meanwhile, at the police station, Captain Melinda Ramirez's office phone rang nonstop. She answered call after call, her face growing more concerned with each passing minute. "Yes, I understand the severity of the situation," she said, her voice tense. "We're addressing it immediately." As she hung up the phone, her assistant burst in. "Captain, have you seen the videos? It's all over Twitter and Facebook. People are calling it a clear case of racial profiling." Captain Ramirez rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Get Officer West in here, now." When West entered her office, she didn't mince words. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about you anymore. Your actions have put the entire department under scrutiny." West shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "Since when is it protocol to arrest a man without probable cause? To ignore his explanations and manhandle him in front of dozens of witnesses?" She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Officer West, your behavior was not only unprofessional but potentially illegal. I have no choice but to suspend you, effective immediately." West's face paled. "Suspended? For how long?" 3 months without pay," Captain Johnson replied firmly. "And consider yourself lucky it's not worse. Now get out of my sight." As West left, shoulders slumped, the captain turned to her assistant. "Draft a press release. We need to make it clear that we do not condone this kind of behavior and that we're taking immediate action." Back at the hotel, Cooper sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, surrounded by his lawyer and assistant. His phone continued to buzz with messages of support and outrage from friends, family, and even strangers who had seen the videos. "Cooper," Rita said gently, "what do you want to do?" The media is asking for statements. People are calling for protests. Cooper looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "This isn't just about me," he said quietly. "This happens to people who don't have my resources, my connections every single day. We need to do something that will make a real difference." He paused, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to create change that lasts, that goes beyond just one incident or one officer. Something that will hold the entire system accountable." As Cooper spoke, the seed of an idea began to form in his mind. He didn't want revenge or mere punishment. He wanted transformation, a way to ensure that what happened to him wouldn't happen to anyone else. Cooper sat in the hotel's private conference room, surrounded by his closest advisors and legal team. The air was thick with tension, but Cooper's eyes burned with determination. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the polished table. "What happened today isn't just about me," Cooper began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "It's about every person who's ever been wrongly judged, every life that's been changed by a moment of prejudice." Rita, his assistant, nodded solemnly. "The public is outraged, Cooper. They're calling for protests, boycotts. What do you want to do?" Cooper took a deep breath. "A lawsuit won't fix this. Neither will a public apology. We need to hit them where it really hurts." His legal advisor, James, raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "Our investments," Cooper said, his voice gaining strength. "We've poured millions into this city's projects, schools, hospitals, community centers. What if we pulled it all out?" The room fell silent. Then, slowly, understanding dawned on their faces. "It's a bold move," Rita said, her eyes wide. "But it could work. The city relies heavily on your investments." James nodded, already flipping through papers. "Legally, we can do it, but the fallout would be massive." Cooper stood up, pacing the room. "That's exactly the point. This isn't about revenge. It's about leverage. We'll use our financial power to force real, lasting change." He turned to face his team, his expression resolute. "We'll draft a list of demands. Police reform, racial sensitivity training, community oversight boards. And we won't reinvest until we see concrete action." The room buzzed with energy as Cooper's team began to work, mapping out strategies and crunching numbers. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to fight for justice. As the meeting progressed, Cooper felt a mix of emotions. There was anger at what had happened, determination to make a difference, and a deep sense of responsibility. He knew his actions would affect many lives, but he also knew that sometimes real change required bold moves. "This is bigger than just one incident," Cooper said, looking at each person in the room. "We have the power to make a real difference. Let's use it." The fallout from Cooper's arrest was swift and far-reaching. Within hours of his announcement to withdraw investments, the city was in turmoil. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, their headlines blaring across screens and newspapers. Millionaire investor Cooper Turner pulls funding after racial profiling incident. City projects in jeopardy as Turner withdraws support. Police department under fire, Turner demands reform. The business community was thrown into chaos. Phone lines buzzed constantly as worried investors and project managers sought answers. Major developments that had been years in the making suddenly ground to a halt. The gleaming towers that were supposed to revitalize the downtown area now stood as half-finished monuments to the city's shame. Local officials found themselves in a frenzy, desperately trying to control the damage. The mayor's office issued statement after statement, promising a full investigation and immediate action. But their words rang hollow in the face of Cooper's resolute stance. Amidst the chaos, Cooper Turner stood tall. He called a press conference, drawing a massive crowd of reporters, community leaders, and concerned citizens. As he stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the audience. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident," Cooper began, his voice strong and clear. "It's a symptom of a much deeper problem that plagues our society. Racial profiling isn't just an inconvenience. It's a dangerous practice that destroys lives and erodes trust in our institutions." Cooper's words resonated deeply with the crowd. Many nodded in agreement, some wiped away tears. This isn't about revenge or punishment, he continued. It's about creating real, lasting change. We need comprehensive police reform. We need better training, increased accountability, and a complete overhaul of how law enforcement interacts with marginalized communities. As Cooper spoke, his passion and sincerity shone through. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman making demands. He was a concerned citizen fighting for justice. I stand here today not just as Cooper Turner, the investor, but as a member of this community. I've experienced firsthand the humiliation and fear that comes with being unfairly targeted. But I'm lucky. I have resources and support that many others don't. This fight isn't just for me. It's for every person who's ever been wrongly judged, every life that's been upended by prejudice. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the city streets. Cooper's words had struck a chord, igniting a spark of hope and determination in the hearts of many. As the press conference ended, it was clear that this was just the beginning. Cooper Turner had set in motion a chain of events that would challenge the status quo and push for meaningful change. The city held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. In the days following his press conference, Cooper Turner wasted no time in turning his words into action. He knew that real change required more than just speeches and promises. It needed concrete tools to empower the community and hold law enforcement accountable. Cooper called a meeting with his most trusted advisors and tech experts. As they gathered in his sleek office overlooking the city, he shared his vision for a groundbreaking app. "We need something that gives people a voice," Cooper explained, his eyes shining with determination. "An app that lets folks report police misconduct and racial profiling as it happens. No more swept under the rug incidents, no more he said, she said. We're going to create a digital paper trail that can't be ignored." The room buzzed with excitement as Cooper sketched out his idea. The app would be user-friendly, allowing citizens to quickly and easily document their interactions with law enforcement. It would capture video, audio, and written reports, all time-stamped and geotagged for accuracy. "This isn't about attacking the police," Cooper clarified. "It's about transparency and accountability. Good officers have nothing to fear from this, but those who abuse their power, they'll know they're being watched." As word of Cooper's project spread, public support swelled. Activists who had long fought against racial profiling saw the app as a potential game-changer. Community leaders rallied behind Cooper, recognizing the power of technology to drive social change. Melissa Santos, a prominent civil rights attorney, praised Cooper's initiative. "This app could be the missing piece we've been looking for," she said in a TV interview. "It gives everyday people the tools to document injustice and demand action." Cooper worked tirelessly with a team of developers to bring the app to life. They faced challenges: ensuring user privacy, verifying reports, and creating a system that could handle large amounts of data. But Cooper's determination never wavered. As the app took shape, Cooper received countless messages of support from people across the city and beyond. Many shared their own stories of racial profiling, further fueling his resolve. "Your courage has given us hope," one message read. "Thank you for standing up for all of us." Cooper knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but as he watched his vision become reality, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. This app wasn't just about technology, it was about justice, equality, and the power of one person to make a difference. Meanwhile, Officer Henry West sat in his dimly lit living room, the TV flickering with news reports about Cooper Turner's new app. The suspended officer's face twisted with anger as he watched, his fists clenching and unclenching rhythmically. "Who does he think he is?" West muttered, his voice dripping with bitterness. The humiliation of his suspension burned in his chest, fueling a growing resentment towards Cooper. West grabbed his phone, scrolling through his contacts. He paused on the name of his old partner, Officer Mike Johnson. Without hesitation, he hit the call button. "Mike, it's Henry, we need to talk," West said, his voice low and urgent. "This Turner guy, he's going too far. His app is going to make our jobs impossible." As West spoke, his words became more heated. "We can't just sit back and let this happen. There's got to be something we can do." Over the next few days, West reached out to more of his colleagues. He arranged secret meetings in bars and coffee shops away from prying eyes. At each gathering, he fanned the flames of fear and anger among his fellow officers. "This app isn't about accountability," West would say, leaning in close. "It's about control. They want to tie our hands, make us afraid to do our jobs. We can't let that happen." Some officers nodded in agreement, their own fears and frustrations bubbling to the surface. Others seemed hesitant, unsure of how to respond to the changing tide of public opinion. West's phone buzzed constantly with messages from like-minded officers. They shared articles about police under attack, complained about the growing scrutiny, and whispered about ways to fight back against Cooper's initiative. As the days passed, West's anger didn't subside. Instead, it grew, twisting into something darker. He spent hours poring over news articles about Cooper, studying his schedule, his habits. The suspended officer's mind raced with possibilities, each more drastic than the last. "We need to send a message," West told a group of sympathetic officers during a late-night meeting. "Show Turner and his supporters that we won't be pushed around. That we're the ones who keep this city safe, not some millionaire with a fancy app." The other officers exchanged uneasy glances, but West didn't notice. His eyes gleamed with a dangerous light as he continued to plot his revenge against Cooper Turner. As news of Cooper Turner's app spread, excitement rippled through the city, especially in communities that had long felt the weight of racial profiling. The app, designed to document and report instances of police misconduct, quickly became a beacon of hope for many. In a bustling community center, a group of residents gathered to learn more about the app. The room buzzed with energy as people shared their stories and discussed how this tool could make a difference. "It's about time we had something like this," said Maria, a longtime resident of the neighborhood. Her eyes shone with determination as she spoke. "Now we can show the world what we've been dealing with for years." Cooper found himself in high demand, fielding requests for interviews from various media outlets. In a primetime TV appearance, he sat across from a well-known news anchor, his posture relaxed, but his words carrying the weight of his mission. "This isn't about targeting good police officers," Cooper explained, his voice calm and measured. "It's about creating a system of accountability that benefits everyone. When law enforcement is transparent, it builds trust with the community." The anchor leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "But some critics say this app could lead to false accusations or hinder police work. How do you respond to that?" Cooper nodded, acknowledging the concern. "We've built in safeguards to prevent misuse, but at its core, this app is about giving people a voice and creating a record. If there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear from transparency." As Cooper's message reached more people, support for his initiative grew. Social media buzzed with discussions about police reform, and hashtags related to Cooper's app trended daily. Community leaders and activists rallied behind his cause, organizing marches and town hall meetings to discuss the importance of accountability in law enforcement. The mounting pressure began to weigh on city leadership. Mayor Thompson sat in her office, surrounded by advisors, all wearing expressions of concern. "We can't ignore this anymore," the mayor said, rubbing her temples. "Turner's app is gaining too much traction. We need to address these concerns head-on." Her chief of staff nodded in agreement. "Maybe it's time we consider implementing some of the reforms Cooper is calling for. Show the public we're listening and willing to change." As the days passed, more and more people downloaded the app, eager to be part of what they saw as a movement for positive change. Cooper watched the numbers grow, feeling a mix of pride and responsibility. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but seeing the community come together filled him with hope. Officer Henry West sat in his dimly lit living room, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop screen. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing out messages to fellow officers who shared his concerns about Cooper Turner's new app. The suspended policeman's eyes narrowed with determination as he hit send on another carefully worded email. "We can't let this app destroy everything we've worked for," West muttered to himself, his voice thick with frustration. Over the next few days, West began reaching out to more and more officers. He started with those he knew well, cops who had been on the force for years and were set in their ways. Many of them were already grumbling about the changes Cooper's app might bring. "Listen," West said during a hushed meeting in a local diner, leaning in close to a group of 4 veteran officers. "This Turner guy, he doesn't understand what it's like out there on the streets. He's trying to make our jobs impossible." The other officers nodded, their faces etched with worry and anger. One of them, Officer Johnson, spoke up. "But what can we do?" The higher-ups seemed to be backing down. West's eyes glinted with resolve. "We stick together. We show them that we won't be pushed around by some millionaire with a fancy app." As word spread, more officers began reaching out to West. They met in small groups, in quiet corners of bars, or in each other's homes. West's message was always the same. Cooper Turner was a threat to their way of life, to the very fabric of law enforcement. "He's painting us all with the same brush," West told a gathering of younger officers one evening, "making us out to be the bad guys when we're just trying to do our jobs and keep people safe." The younger officers shifted uncomfortably, but West could see his words were having an effect. He pressed on, his voice low and persuasive. "We need to stand united, show Turner and his supporters that we won't be bullied or intimidated." As the network grew, West began to feel a sense of power returning. He was no longer just a suspended officer. He was becoming a leader, a voice for those who felt silenced by Cooper's movement. In these clandestine meetings, West carefully planted seeds of rebellion. He suggested small acts of resistance, dragging feet on paperwork related to the app, subtly discouraging citizens from using it, quietly spreading doubt about its effectiveness. "We're not doing anything wrong," West assured his growing following. "We're just protecting ourselves and our ability to do our jobs." Cooper Turner stood at the front of the packed community center, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the buzzing energy in the room. People from all walks of life had gathered to hear about his new app, their faces a mix of curiosity and hope. "Thank you all for coming," Cooper began, his voice warm and steady. "I know there's been a lot of talk about this app, and I want to clear the air." He took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces before him. "This isn't about pointing fingers or making enemies. It's about building bridges and making our community safer for everyone." As Cooper spoke, he could see the tension in the room start to ease. He explained how the app would work, using simple terms that everyone could understand. "Imagine you're walking down the street and you see something that doesn't feel right," he said, his hands moving to illustrate his words. "With this app, you can quickly and safely report it. It's not just about police interactions, it's about all of us looking out for each other." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Cooper smiled, encouraged by their response. "But here's the most important part," he continued, his voice growing more passionate. "This app isn't just for reporting problems. It's also a tool for highlighting the good things happening in our community." He went on to explain how citizens could use the app to report potential dangers, like suspicious activity or unsafe road conditions. "By working together, we can make our streets safer for everyone, including our police officers." As Cooper spoke, he could see faces lighting up with understanding. People began to nod, some even clapping in agreement. "This isn't about us versus them," Cooper said, his voice filled with conviction. "It's about all of us coming together to create a fairer, safer community." After his presentation, Cooper opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up all around the room. He answered each question patiently, taking the time to address concerns and clarify misunderstandings. One woman stood up, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Turner, I'm worried this might make police officers feel like we don't trust them. How do we avoid that?" Cooper nodded, appreciating her concern. "That's a great question," he said. "This app isn't about distrust. It's about transparency and accountability. We're inviting our police force to be part of this process, to work with us in making our community better." As the meeting went on, Cooper could feel the mood in the room shifting. What had started as a tense gathering was turning into something more positive, more hopeful. People were talking to each other, sharing ideas, and getting excited about the possibilities. By the end of the meeting, Cooper felt a sense of accomplishment. He had taken a big step forward in bringing his vision to life. As he looked out at the smiling faces and heard the excited chatter, he knew that change was possible. It wouldn't be easy, but with the community behind him, Cooper felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the launch date for Cooper's app approached, tensions in the city began to simmer. Officer West, still suspended and burning with resentment, had been busy. His group of discontented officers had grown from a handful to dozens, their anger fueled by fear and misinformation. West knew he couldn't confront Cooper directly, so he turned to more underhanded tactics. He began reaching out to local news outlets, planting seeds of doubt about the app's true purpose. "It's not about safety," West told a sympathetic reporter over coffee. "It's about making police officers' jobs impossible. How can we protect the community if we're constantly looking over our shoulders?" The story spread like wildfire. Soon, other media outlets picked it up, running headlines like, "New app, tool for safety or weapon against police," and "Community divided over controversial police monitoring app." Cooper watched in dismay as the narrative he had worked so hard to build began to unravel. He had hoped the app would bring people together, but instead, it seemed to be driving them apart. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the city's main square became a battleground of ideas. On one side, supporters of the app gathered, holding signs that read, "Accountability saves lives," and "Reform now." On the other, a group opposed to the app chanted, "Support our police and safety first." Cooper stood at the edge of the square, his heart heavy as he watched the two groups shout at each other across the divide. This wasn't what he had wanted at all. "Mr. Turner," a reporter called out, rushing up to him with a microphone. "What do you have to say about claims that your app is anti-police and will endanger public safety?" Cooper took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "This app isn't about being anti-police," he said. "It's about creating a safer community for everyone, including our law enforcement officers. We're not looking to point fingers, we're looking to build trust and transparency." But even as he spoke, Cooper could see that his words weren't having the impact he'd hoped for. The protests continued to grow, and the division in the community seemed to deepen with each passing day. Cooper knew he was facing a massive public relations challenge. He needed to find a way to refocus the conversation on reform and community safety. But with each inflammatory headline and heated protest, that goal seemed to slip further away. Despite the swirling controversy, Cooper stood firm in his decision to launch the app. On a crisp Monday morning, he took a deep breath and pressed the button that made it available to the public. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, hundreds of people had downloaded the app, eager to be part of this new era of accountability. Cooper's phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one representing a new user joining the cause. "Look at this," Cooper said to his assistant, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We've already hit 1,000 downloads." As the day wore on, reports began to trickle in. Some were minor incidents, rude comments or unnecessary stops, but others were more serious. A young black man reported being roughly handled during a routine traffic stop. An elderly Hispanic woman shared a video of an officer speaking to her disrespectfully when she called for help. Each report came with timestamps, locations, and often video evidence. It was exactly what Cooper had envisioned. A real-time, undeniable record of police interactions with the community. "This is it," Cooper said softly, scrolling through the reports. "This is what we needed." The app wasn't just collecting complaints, it was also gathering positive reports. Officers who went above and beyond, who showed kindness and respect in their interactions. Cooper felt a surge of hope as he saw these reports coming in alongside the negative ones. As night fell, Cooper sat in his office looking out over the city. The app's launch had been a success, but he knew this was just the beginning. The real work, using this data to push for meaningful change, was still ahead. "We did it," he murmured to himself, feeling a mix of pride and determination. "Now let's make it count." One morning, Officer West paced in his living room, his face twisted with anger as he watched the news coverage of Cooper's app launch. The success of the app felt like a personal attack, and he couldn't stand by any longer. "This has gone too far," he muttered, picking up his phone. He dialed a number, his fingers shaking with rage. "Jim, it's Henry. We need to meet, now." Hours later, West sat at the head of a table in a dimly lit bar, surrounded by a group of disgruntled officers. The air was thick with tension and cigarette smoke. "This app is a threat to everything we stand for," West said, his voice low and intense. "It's time we fight back." The officers nodded in agreement, their faces grim. West laid out his plan, a lawsuit against Cooper and his app, claiming it violated their rights and put them in danger. "We'll say it's making our jobs impossible," West explained, "that it's turning the public against us." As the group discussed the details, West felt a surge of power. This was his chance to regain control, to put Cooper in his place. The next day, West and his supporters filed the lawsuit. The news spread like wildfire through the city. Cooper was in a meeting when his assistant burst in, her face pale. "Mr. Cooper, you need to see this," she said, handing him her tablet. Cooper's eyes widened as he read the headline, "Police officers sue Millionaire over controversial app." The lawsuit claimed that Cooper's app was a form of harassment against law enforcement, creating a hostile work environment and putting officers' lives at risk. It demanded that the app be shut down immediately. As word of the lawsuit spread, the city erupted in chaos. Protesters filled the streets, some supporting Cooper and his app, others backing the police. Signs waved in the air, bearing slogans like, "Protect our police" and "Accountability now." Cooper watched from his office window as the crowds grew. He felt a mix of determination and worry. He had known there would be pushback, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon or so forcefully. As the sun set on the city, the protest showed no signs of slowing down. The lawsuit had drawn a line in the sand, dividing the community. Both sides dug in, prepared for a long and bitter fight. Cooper sat in his office, staring at the lawsuit papers spread across his desk. His eyes were tired, but his resolve remained unshaken. The sudden legal attack had caught him off guard, but he wasn't about to let it derail his mission. "We're not backing down," Cooper said firmly to his legal team gathered around him. "This app is too important. We'll fight this with everything we've got." His lawyer, Michael, nodded in agreement. "We have a strong case, Cooper. The app doesn't violate any laws. It's simply a tool for transparency." As they discussed their strategy, Cooper's assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Cooper, you might want to see this," she said, handing him a tablet. Cooper's heart sank as he read the latest news articles. Public opinion was starting to shift. West's claims that the app was endangering police officers were gaining traction. Social media was buzzing with debates, and not all of them were in Cooper's favor. "We need to get ahead of this," Cooper said, running a hand through his hair. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow. We need to remind people why this app is so important." But as Cooper prepared for the press conference, more bad news rolled in. Several prominent business leaders in the city had released statements supporting West's lawsuit. They argued that Cooper's actions, including his withdrawal of investments, were causing more harm than good. "Cooper Turner's vendetta against our police force is tearing our city apart," one statement read. "His app is creating distrust and putting our brave officers at risk. It's time for Mr. Turner to remember that his actions have consequences." The words stung, but Cooper refused to let them deter him. He knew the truth, that his app was about justice, not vengeance. It was about protecting people who didn't have the resources to protect themselves. As he stood before the cameras the next day, Cooper felt the weight of the city's eyes upon him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "I understand that there are concerns about the impact of this app," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "But I want to be clear. This isn't about attacking our police force. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that everyone in our city feels safe and respected, regardless of the color of their skin." Cooper went on to explain how the app worked, emphasizing its features that could actually help law enforcement by improving community relations and reporting potential dangers. "This app isn't just about documenting misconduct," he explained. "It's about building trust between our communities and those who are sworn to protect them. We can't ignore the problems that exist, but we can work together to solve them." As Cooper finished his speech, he could see that some people were nodding in agreement, but he also noticed the skeptical looks, the crossed arms, the furrowed brows. He knew the battle was far from over. As the lawsuit against Cooper's app progressed, the city found itself divided. Tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface for years now bubbled over, spilling onto the streets in a series of heated protests and counter-protests. On one side, Cooper's supporters marched with signs bearing slogans like "Justice for All" and "Accountability Matters." They chanted his name and shared stories of their own experiences with racial profiling. These crowds were diverse, filled with people from all walks of life who believed in Cooper's vision of a more equitable future. On the other side, those who backed Officer West rallied under banners proclaiming, "Support our police," and "Protect those who protect us." Many were fellow officers and their families, along with citizens who feared the app would make their neighborhoods less safe. The city streets became a battleground of ideologies, with both sides facing off in tense confrontations. Local businesses shuttered their windows, fearing property damage. The air was thick with tension, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for the powder keg to explode. Cooper watched it all unfold with a growing sense of unease. He had never wanted this, the division, the anger, the fear. His intention had been to bring people together, to create positive change. But now, as he saw his city tearing itself apart, he couldn't help but question his choices. The legal pressure was mounting too. West's lawyers were aggressive, painting Cooper as a reckless vigilante with a personal vendetta against the police force. They argued that the app endangered officers' lives and violated their privacy rights. Each day brought new challenges, new accusations, new hurdles to overcome. Public opinion swayed back and forth like a pendulum. One day, Cooper would receive an outpouring of support. The next, he'd face a barrage of criticism. The constant scrutiny and pressure began to wear on him. Late one night, as Cooper sat alone in his office, he found himself staring at the app on his phone. The tool he had created with such hope and determination now felt like a double-edged sword. He wondered, not for the first time, if he had made the right choice. "What if I'm wrong?" he whispered to the empty room. "What if this app causes more harm than good?" The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. He had started this movement with the best intentions, but now it seemed to be spiraling out of control. The future of his app, and the larger movement for police reform, hung in the balance, and Cooper wasn't sure anymore if he was strong enough to carry that weight. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The courthouse steps were crowded with protesters from both sides, their chants echoing through the morning air. Cooper took a deep breath as he climbed the steps, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside the courtroom, Cooper's eyes met Officer West's. The officer's face was a mask of stern determination, but Cooper could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. As the proceedings began, Cooper listened intently to the arguments presented by both sides. When it was finally his turn to take the stand, Cooper felt a wave of nerves wash over him. But as he looked out at the faces in the courtroom, he remembered why he was there. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who had ever faced injustice at the hands of those sworn to protect them. With a steady voice, Cooper began to speak. "Your Honor, members of the court, I stand before you today not as an enemy of law enforcement, but as a citizen who believes in the power of transparency and accountability." He went on to explain the true purpose of the app, his voice growing stronger with each word. This app isn't about targeting police officers. It's about creating a system where both citizens and officers are protected. It's about ensuring that the truth is always accessible, no matter who you are or what uniform you wear. Cooper's words seemed to resonate with many in the courtroom. He saw heads nodding, eyes widening with understanding. Even some of the officers present seemed to be considering his words carefully. "I created this app because I believe that when we shine a light on our actions, we all become better," Cooper continued, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not about punishment. It's about progress. It's about creating a community where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard." As Cooper spoke, he could see the impact of his words. The tension in the room began to shift. People who had entered the courtroom with firm opinions found themselves reconsidering their stance. Even Officer West, who had been glaring at Cooper throughout the proceedings, seemed to falter for a moment. Cooper concluded his testimony with a plea for understanding. "I ask you all to see this app not as a threat, but as an opportunity. An opportunity for growth, for healing, and for building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. As Cooper stepped down from the stand, a hushed murmur swept through the courtroom. His words had clearly made an impact, but the outcome of the case was still uncertain. The judge's decision would determine not just the fate of the app, but potentially the future of police reform in their city. As the trial continued, the courtroom was suddenly thrust into chaos. A group of unexpected witnesses entered, carrying stacks of documents and looking nervous but determined. The judge called for order as the newcomers approached the bench. "Your Honor," one of them said, her voice shaking slightly, "we have evidence that we believe is crucial to this case." The judge, intrigued, allowed them to present their findings. What followed was a series of shocking revelations that left the courtroom in stunned silence. The whistleblowers, who were revealed to be former and current police officers, presented a damning collection of documents and testimonies. These records painted a disturbing picture of Officer West's career, revealing a long history of misconduct that had been carefully hidden from the public eye. As the evidence was presented, Cooper's eyes widened in disbelief. He watched as Officer West's face turned pale, the man's confident demeanor crumbling with each new revelation. The documents showed multiple instances of racial profiling by Officer West, dating back years. There were reports of unwarranted stops, excessive use of force, and discriminatory practices, all of which had been systematically covered up by the department. One of the whistleblowers, a veteran officer named Sarah Johnson, took the stand. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her words were clear and damning. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. What happened to Mr. Turner wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that's been going on for far too long. As Sarah continued her testimony, the mood in the courtroom shifted dramatically. People who had been skeptical of Cooper's app now looked at it with new eyes, seeing it as a necessary tool to combat the very corruption that had been exposed. Officer West, who had been so confident and defiant throughout the trial, now sat slumped in his chair. His eyes darted around the room, looking for support, but finding only shocked and disapproving faces. The public gallery erupted in murmurs and gasps as more details emerged. The judge had to call for order several times as the revelations continued to shock the courtroom. Cooper sat in stunned silence, processing the information. He felt a mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication that his concerns had been proven valid, but sadness at the extent of the problem he had uncovered. As the last of the evidence was presented, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The judge called for a recess to review the new information, leaving everyone to grapple with the implications of what they had just learned. As the trial resumed, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. Officer West's reputation lay in ruins, his once confident demeanor replaced by a look of defeat. The lawsuit that he and his supporters had filed against Cooper's app began to crumble under the weight of the damning evidence. News reporters scrambled to update their stories, their headlines now focusing on West's history of abuse and the police department's failure to address it. The app, which had been a source of controversy, was suddenly being hailed as a vital tool for exposing corruption and promoting transparency in law enforcement. Cooper sat quietly, his face a mix of emotions. He felt relieved that the truth had come to light, but also saddened by the extent of the problem he had uncovered. As he looked around the courtroom, he saw many faces that had once been skeptical now looking at him with newfound respect and support. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. What had started as a small group of Cooper's supporters had grown into a large, diverse assembly of community members. They held signs praising Cooper's courage and calling for police reform. The chants of justice and transparency now echoed through the streets. Local community leaders who had initially been hesitant to back Cooper's app were now stepping forward to voice their support. Reverend Johnson, a respected figure in the community, stood before the crowd and declared, "Today, we've seen the importance of accountability. Mr. Turner's app isn't just about one man or one incident. It's about creating a safer, fairer community for all of us." As the day wore on, more and more people downloaded the app, seeing it as a way to be part of the solution. Social media was abuzz with discussions about police reform and the power of technology to drive change. Back in the courtroom, Cooper's legal team presented their closing arguments. They spoke passionately about the need for transparency and accountability in law enforcement, pointing to the revelations about Officer West as proof of why the app was necessary. "This app," Cooper's lawyer said, her voice strong and clear, "is not a threat to good police officers. It's a threat to those who abuse their power. It's a tool to protect both our citizens and the many hard-working, honest officers who serve our community every day." As she finished speaking, a quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Even some of the police officers present nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. The tide had turned. What had started as a controversial app was now being seen as a necessary step towards a more just and transparent system. Cooper's supporters, once on the defensive, now stood tall, their voices growing stronger as they called for change. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom as he announced his decision. "In light of the evidence presented, this lawsuit is hereby dismissed." A collective sigh of relief swept through Cooper's supporters, while Officer West slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions finally crashing down on him. As the courtroom emptied, the police captain approached West with a grim expression. "Officer West, your actions have brought shame to our department. Your suspension is now permanent. You're fired, effective immediately." West's face reddened with anger and shame. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his lips. He knew it was over. With his head bowed, he silently handed over his badge and gun. In the days that followed, the fallout from the trial spread through the police department like wildfire. Several officers who had been part of West's group found themselves under intense scrutiny. Internal Affairs launched a thorough investigation, combing through years of records and interviewing dozens of officers. Cooper watched from the sidelines as the department he had once viewed as an adversary began to transform. The police chief, her face etched with determination, announced a major internal review. "We've failed our community," she said at a press conference, "but we're committed to earning back their trust." New reforms were implemented swiftly. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers on duty. A civilian oversight board was established to review complaints of misconduct. Training programs on racial sensitivity and de-escalation techniques were expanded. Cooper's app played a crucial role in these changes. It provided a wealth of data that helped identify patterns of misconduct in areas where additional training was needed. Citizens felt empowered, knowing they had a tool to hold law enforcement accountable. As the weeks passed, Cooper saw the impact of his efforts ripple through the community. Trust between the police and citizens began to slowly rebuild. Officers who had initially resisted the app now saw its value in protecting them from false accusations and improving their relationship with the community. One afternoon, as Cooper walked through a local park, he overheard a conversation between a young boy and a police officer. The officer was kneeling down, explaining how to use the app responsibly. "Remember," the officer said with a smile, "this isn't just about catching bad behavior. It's about working together to make our community safer for everyone." Cooper felt a lump in his throat as he watched the scene. It was a small moment, but it represented everything he had hoped to achieve. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in months, Cooper felt a sense of true hope for the future. Cooper's app, now vindicated by the court's decision, quickly gained national attention. News outlets across the country began featuring stories about its success in improving police accountability and public safety in Cooper's city. The app's dual functionality, allowing citizens to report both police misconduct and potential dangers, struck a chord with communities far and wide. Within weeks, city officials from across the nation were reaching out to Cooper, eager to learn more about implementing the app in their own jurisdictions. Cooper found himself traveling frequently, meeting with mayors, police chiefs, and community leaders to explain the app's benefits and how it could be tailored to each city's unique needs. In Chicago, the app helped identify a pattern of excessive force in a particular precinct, leading to targeted training and reforms. In Los Angeles, it played a crucial role in de-escalating a potentially violent confrontation between police and protesters by providing real-time information to both sides. As more cities adopted the app, its impact grew exponentially. Police departments that initially resisted soon found themselves embracing the technology. Officers reported feeling more secure in their interactions, knowing that the app provided an unbiased record of events. One police chief in Atlanta remarked, "This app has been a game changer for us. It's not just about catching bad behavior. It's about showcasing the good work our officers do every day. It's helping us build trust with our community in ways we never thought possible." The app's ability to report dangers also proved invaluable. In Seattle, a user's quick report of a suspicious package led to the prevention of a potential terrorist attack. In Miami, the app helped coordinate rescue efforts during a hurricane, saving countless lives. As months passed, the data spoke for itself. Cities that had implemented the app saw a significant decrease in instances of police misconduct. Complaints against officers dropped by an average of 35% in the first year alone. More importantly, community surveys showed a marked increase in trust and positive interactions between citizens and law enforcement. Cooper watched with a mixture of pride and humility as his creation spread across the country, becoming a cornerstone of modern policing. He often thought back to that fateful day at the hotel, marveling at how a moment of injustice had led to such widespread positive change. As the dust settled from Officer West's dismissal, a palpable shift began to ripple through the police force. The once resistant officers found themselves at a crossroads, forced to confront the reality of their changing world. Many who had initially stood by West now distanced themselves, recognizing the gravity of his actions and the consequences that followed. In the precinct break room, Officer Sarah Martinez, a veteran of 15 years, sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "You know," she said to her partner, "I never thought I'd say this, but maybe this app isn't such a bad idea after all." Her partner, Officer Tom Reynolds, nodded slowly. "I was skeptical at first, but after seeing what happened with West, it makes you think, doesn't it?" As the days passed, more officers began to voice similar sentiments. The fear and resentment that had initially surrounded Cooper's app gradually gave way to curiosity and, eventually, acceptance. During a department-wide meeting, Chief Johnson addressed his officers with a mix of sternness and empathy. "What happened with Officer West was a wake-up call for all of us," he said, his voice echoing through the packed room. "But it's also an opportunity. This app isn't our enemy, it's a tool that can help us serve our community better." The chief's words resonated with many. Officers who had once viewed the app as a threat to their authority now saw it as a shield against false accusations and a way to showcase their professionalism. Officer Rodriguez, a rookie who had been on the force for just 6 months, found himself embracing the change wholeheartedly. "It's actually made me feel safer on the job," he confided to his sergeant. "Knowing that every interaction is recorded, it keeps everyone honest, you know?" As more officers began to support the reforms, a new atmosphere of accountability and transparency spread throughout the department. The US versus them mentality that had long divided the police and the community began to crumble. In community meetings across the city, citizens and officers alike shared stories of positive interactions facilitated by the app. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly resident of a once troubled neighborhood, stood up at one such meeting. "I've lived here for 50 years, she said, her voice quavering with emotion. "And for the first time, I feel like the police are truly here to protect us all." The community center buzzed with excitement as people from all walks of life gathered to honor Cooper Turner. The large hall was decorated with banners and balloons, a sea of colors reflecting the diversity of the city itself. At the front of the room, a stage had been set up, adorned with a podium and a large banner that read, "Celebrating Change, Honoring Cooper Turner." As Cooper entered the room, a hush fell over the crowd before erupting into thunderous applause. He walked down the aisle, shaking hands and exchanging warm smiles with those he passed. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. Mayor Thompson stepped up to the podium, her voice filled with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor a man who turned personal adversity into a catalyst for change. Cooper Turner could have chosen anger and resentment. Instead, he chose hope and action." The crowd cheered as Cooper made his way to the stage. He embraced the mayor before taking his place at the podium. As he looked out over the sea of faces, he took a deep breath, his emotions threatening to overtake him. When I stood in handcuffs outside that hotel, Cooper began, his voice thick with emotion. I never imagined I'd be standing here today. But what happened to me that day happens to countless others who don't have the resources or platform to fight back. I knew I had to do something. He paused, collecting himself. This app, this movement, it's not about me. It's about all of us. It's about creating a city where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard. As Cooper spoke, faces in the audience nodded in agreement. Some wiped away tears, others clasped hands with their neighbors. The atmosphere in the room was electric, filled with a sense of shared purpose and hope. I see officers here today, Cooper continued, gesturing to a group of uniformed police in the audience. Your willingness to embrace change, to work with us instead of against us, that's what real courage looks like. Together, we're building trust, fostering understanding, and making our city safer for everyone. The police officers stood, receiving a round of applause from the crowd. It was a powerful moment, a visual representation of the bridges that had been built. Cooper's voice softened as he concluded. This journey hasn't been easy. There were times I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But standing here today, seeing all of you, I know that together, we've started something incredible. This is just the beginning. As Cooper finished speaking, the room erupted in a standing ovation. People cheered, hugged, and wiped away tears. It was more than just an acknowledgement of Cooper's efforts. It was a celebration of a community coming together, of barriers being broken down, and of a brighter future for all. As the applause finally died down, Cooper stepped away from the podium, his heart full of emotion. He was immediately surrounded by a group of people who had been instrumental in his journey. His legal team, community leaders, and even some of the police officers who had embraced the changes. Rita, his assistant who had been there on that fateful day outside the hotel, gave him a warm hug. "You did it, Mr. Cooper," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You really did it." Cooper looked around at the faces of those who had supported him through thick and thin. There was Marcus, the young developer who had worked tirelessly to bring the app to life, and Maria, the community organizer who had rallied support when things seemed bleakest. Each person represented a piece of the puzzle that had come together to create real change. As he mingled with the crowd, Cooper couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The app, which had started as a response to his own experience, had grown into something much bigger. It was now being used in cities across the country, helping to bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities. Officer Johnson, one of the first to embrace the app, approached Cooper with a smile. "You know, when this all started, I was skeptical," he admitted. "But now I can't imagine doing my job without it. It's made us all better." Cooper nodded, grateful for the officer's honesty. "That's exactly what we hoped for," he replied. "It was never about pointing fingers. It was about creating understanding and accountability on all sides." As the evening wore on, Cooper found himself in conversation after conversation with people whose lives had been touched by his work. There was the mother who tearfully thanked him for making her son feel safer in his own neighborhood, and the young activist who told him that the app had inspired her to pursue a career in law. Each story, each grateful face reminded Cooper of why he had embarked on this journey in the first place. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He had become a symbol of what was possible when people refused to accept injustice and worked together for change. As the event began to wind down, Cooper stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the warmth and energy of the community he had helped to transform. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that his legacy would continue long after this night was over. The app would keep evolving, adapting to new challenges and needs. But more than that, the spirit of cooperation and understanding that it had fostered would continue to grow. Cooper had shown the world that change was possible, that one person's stand for justice could ripple out and touch countless lives. If you enjoyed the story of Cooper and Officer West, I hand-picked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.